Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. And you've probably seen I've mentioned destructuring in the last couple of videos, particularly with objects, because I only thought it was something you do with objects. I've now learned you can also do it with arrays. So I'm just going to go over destructuring all over again in general so we learn what this is. It's an ES6 feature. It's an ES6 feature. So basically this was brought to JavaScript like many of its other really awesome features like arrow functions and classes, which was only introduced in ES6. So let's talk about it. Okay, what is destructuring? Destructuring just means taking a structure, a data structure, and breaking it down to smaller pieces. So first let's talk about array destructuring. So array destructuring. The way this works is that, let's say you have an array. So here's my, we'll call it my array. Just avoid any reserved words. My array, I'm going to say it equals 1 and 2. Neat. Okay. Now what I'd like to do is I'm going to have a variable called 1 and 2. And I would like those variables to equal 1 and 2. The way you would do it is you would do, and actually let me just put my declaration stuff there so that way it's all nice and proper. And const and let, those were also ES6 things. Before everything was var. You can still use var, but why? Okay. Now, so basically, if I want to watch, if I if I want to do this, so I want to have a variable called 1 and 2. What I can do is I can just do this. So the way JavaScript is going to take this is going to say, hey, you have two variables, 1 and 2, and you're saying it equals this array. So since I have an array of variables, it's going to say, hey, and this is an array, it's going to say, okay, 1 is going to equal 1, and 2 is going to equal 2. So let's test that out. Console.log equals 1. Console.log equals 2. Save. And then let's run it. One and 2. Nice. Okay, so basically this allowed me to create two freestanding variables out of that array without me having to go like 1 equals my array index 0, 2 equals my array index. But what if I only wanted 2 to equal 2, but I don't want anything to equal 1? Then I would just do this. Okay, essentially I'm skipping. When you put that comma there, it just skips the first variable and says, okay, you want to assign 2 to the second variable in the array. Okay, so let me save that. Let's see how that looks. That should run just fine. And there, yeah, it just prints 2. Okay, so if you had an array with several different variables, you'd do that. And then there's also something called, also introduced in ES6, called the rest operator. So this would generally be used if you want to copy the whole array, or let's say this is has 3 or 4 items. So let's say 3, 4. Okay, and I want to skip 1, so I'm going to leave that comma there, but I want the rest of the numbers to be in an array stored in the variable 2. Then I would just do that. So what this means is skip the first item because I put that comma there, and then this, in this context, is called the rest operator. You could also use it as a spread operator, which means all the things. Okay, I always just think the 3 dots means all the things. Okay, so in this case, it skips the first one, and you always have to use the rest operator last. So, because it always just, in the context of this type of use, it's always going to mean the rest of them. So I skip 1, and then the rest of them will be assigned to 2. So now if I console log.2, it should give me an array of 2, 3, 4. So let's test that out. 2, 3, 4. Why would that be useful? Well, you could also just do a slice or something like that, but this is a lot less typing, which is nice. Okay. If I wanted to copy the whole array, I could just do this, and it copies the whole array. Why would I want to? Why couldn't I just do, 2 equals my array? You have to understand how JavaScript works under the hood. Okay, when you, like in other languages, the way an array works is that you're actually getting a defined spot in memory, and it's all congruent memory. So this is why, like, if you ever use like C++ or Go or other sort of higher level or lower level languages, what happens is that when you define an array, you actually have to tell it, I want an array with 5 spots. Because what it does, it actually goes into the memory and allocates 5 spots for 5 data points. And then that's where the memory is going to be. So in that case, when you say, hey, this array equals this array, it's actually going to go, it'll actually make a copy into a new spot of memory. But that's not how JavaScript works. Because JavaScript gives you dynamic arrays. They allow you to say, hey, your array can have as many spots as you want. But how can you do that? Because you can't plan your memory. You can't sit there and say, hey, we're going to block an infinite amount of memory here in case you decide to go infinite size. So my understanding, it probably use something called a linked list, where basically the variables are kind of, there's a bunch of memory references linked to each other, which is less memory efficient, but gives you more flexibility. So technically, an array in JavaScript is not the actual data point. It's a reference. It's a reference to where in the memory that those data points are. Okay? Which is why, if I were to just do 2 equals my array, 2 would only be copying. That's why when you do const, like let const my array, I could actually like pop and push variables into my array, because I'm not changing the actual variable my array. My array is, the variable is not the actual array, but a reference to the array. But I can't like say it equals a new array, like put a new bracket, because then that creates a new spot in memory. So it's that's a little technical, but the point is like when you do, an array is really just a pointer. It's pointing to where this array is in the memory. So if I were to do 2 equals my array, 2 just becomes pointing to the same address, which is the same actual array. So if I were to edit 1, it's going to edit the other. So how do I avoid that? What if I want a separate, distinct copy of the array that if I edit, doesn't edit the old one? Well, what I can do is do this, because when you do this, it actually creates a new and distinct array in a separate place in memory. So that's very useful. There are other ways to do it, but this is a cool new ES6 modern, lot less typing kind of way to do it. So that's really cool. Okay, if you run into that issue. Other people would just use, some of the array functions like map, or to just return the array and say, hey, here's a new array. But this is much quicker. So that's like with array destructuring. You could also do this with objects. So if I were to create an object, so we'll just call this my object, and we say it equals, 1, which equals 1. And 2, which equals 2. What we can do is we can do this. We can say, if we put it in brackets like this, 1, okay, and then I go, it equals my object. What's it going to do is going to say, hey, you're looking for a variable in my object that has the name 1. Okay, and when you find that variable, assign the value of that variable to 1 by itself. So it's going to say, okay, let's look inside my object. Is there a property with the same name? 1. Yes. What is the value of it? 1. So we're going to assign that value to the standalone variable 1. So now, if I console.log the number 1, I mean not the number 1, the variable 1, it should give me my thing. So let's see here. Let's run it. Should give me 1. What did I do there? 1 equals my object. Let me think here. My object. Unexpected token equals. I think I need to put const here. And let me put a semicolon over here. Let's make this all clear as possible. Good syntax is good syntax. There we go. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the original, because again, I just copied the array over here, and then 1, because I destructured, I got this variable from my object. Now, some other cool things you can do. What if I don't want to call it 1? I want 1, but I don't want to call it 1. I could do something like this. I can do 1, colon, 3. So I'm saying I want the variable 1, whatever's stored in 1, but I want to store it in a variable called 3. Okay, so now let me see if that works. That's console log the variable 3. So you just use this colon, and it's basically saying, hey, I want this variable, but I want it stored here. So save. Let's run that. And then that worked. See? So when we console log 3, it equaled 1. Now, what if I want the variable 3, but there is no property named 3? Okay, and I want to store it in a variable called 4. But there is no 3, so it's not going to get me back anything, but I still would like something. So I say, hey, you know what? If there is nothing stored in 3, make it equal 4. So that's a default value. And you can do this with the array as well. So if it doesn't find something, you can define a default value by just putting equals and the default value. So it's going to say, hey, I'm going to look for a variable named 3 in the object. And then whatever that value is, I'm going to assign this variable called 4. But if there is no value, I'm going to assign it the variable 4, the value of 4. Oh, okay, so let me console log 4. And if it works, we should get back 4. Node. I already had it open. Okay, so here we go. Node. There we go. Let's see. It console logs 4. Awesome. It works. Okay. So that's just really cool stuff, and so you can do a lot of really cool. And then the thing is that you got to realize you can do this with functions. Okay, I mean this is technically how, if you use React and you're using some of the more modern React syntax, which is like hooks and function components, what happened is that they created a way to use state and function components. So you would be like const state set state equals use state. Oh, actually, go back. It would be React.useState, and then in parentheses you would put your state. So you could just be like whatever your state is in there. And then technically you would have access to state in that function. But when you take a look at this, let's examine the syntax. This looks a lot like array destructuring we were doing up here. Okay? But the problem is, this doesn't look like an array because we have this parentheses here. So it looks more like a function call. So how does that work? Well, what's happening is whatever this function is doing, it's basically returning an array. And then this is being destructuring the array that this function returns. So let's create like a mini version of that. Okay, so we'll say const myfunc, we'll take no parameters for the moment, equals, arrow function, equals and we're just going to say it's going to return an array of 1 and 2. Okay. Okay, so then we can do this. We can do an array. So we'll do const new 1, because we want to mix it with the one we used above, and new 2. Okay, and then we're going to say it equals myfunc, and if I console .log new 1, it should give me 1. Okay, and I'll just do plus new 2 in there too, so it should just be 1, 2. Okay. Why? Because it runs this function. This function returns the array 1, 2. So then it's comparing itself and destructuring that returned array. Okay. So let's save that and run it. What did I do here? My funch. That's not right. Save. Okay. Let's do that. And wait, what happened here? Console log. Let's retrace our footsteps. So there's the array. There's the object of 4. Oh, because I put the plus sign there. Okay, so it worked. What I should have done is concatenated that as, I don't have to use concat, but whatever. So we'll just say, if I put a string in there, it'll make it better. So I'll just put in a space and then plus. So that way it'll treat it like a string. There you go. So 1, 2. Okay. So that works. Okay, so we understand sort of like how that in premise works. But a second, when you use state in React, technically it assigns the object that you define in here as this variable, and there's a function in here as well. So basically this gets a little bit more complicated. So really what's going on, we'll say here we have a parameter, and essentially this first item in the array equals the param. Okay, and then the second item in the array equals the function. This would be your set state function. Okay, so I'm just going to create a basic function. So we'll say equals okay, I will say it's going to equal how would it do this? Well, I'm not going to do the exact same thing as set state, because it's somehow it ties itself to this parameter, so that way it knows when you run this function, it's going to set the value of this parameter and do whatever else set state does to cause to trigger the re-rendering. But we'll just say, hey, you know, console.log 1 plus 2, and then that's that. Okay, so essentially in this array we have two items. The first value is whatever the parameter we pass in is. So now if I go like this, we'll say we pass in the parameter 5. Okay, and then now new2 is a function. So I'm going to do that there. So it should give us 5, because we're assigning 5 to the first value in there, because my func 5. And then the second one's a function that it's going to console log 1 plus 2, which is going to be 3. So it should be 1 space 3 if this all works the way I think it works. 5 is undefined. What did I do there? 5 is correct. Oh, because it doesn't return 5. It console logs 5. So there you. So yeah. So here you saw the 3. So let me make this return 1 plus 2. Return 1 plus 2. So this way it works that way. And then we do this. And there you go, 5, 3. Okay, so you can do some cool stuff. I mean, that's literally how React was able to introduce state to function components. Okay, by using this kind of method, just to kind of show you the power of destructuring and how you can set up really cool tools when you create libraries for other people. So hopefully you found this interesting and useful. You can create a function that'll help create an array set with the tools that someone needs to do something else, and then they would just assign it in this way, and suddenly, hey, I got my tools, which is really, really, really powerful. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.